Have you been keeping up with any of the stuff with Juror number two, Clint Eastwood's new movie? Have you been keeping up with the news around this movie and like kind of like what's going on?
No, I mean, I know that he's making this movie, but other than that, I'm completely unaware.
This movie is out. This movie
It
came out.
is?
Here, I will explain. So this movie's called Juror number two. It's like a lawyer film, right?
Hmm.
And it stars like Nicholas Hoult. And this is his 40th film. And this is probably going to be his final film. I mean, like,
Probably.
come on.
He's
Like,
so
he's
old.
94 years old. He is very, 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 very old. But he's a great filmmaker. I mean, he's
Yeah.
like one of the greatest
Well, the
filmmakers of
greats.
all time. I'm not even kidding about it. Like his movies of recent too, I
Yeah.
think have been in great encapsulations. Like Richard Jewell is, in my opinion, one of the great encapsulating films of the world we live in today. It's amazing. And as the article points out, and this is an article called written by this guy named Chris Lee for The Vulture. Why did Warner Brothers bury Clint Eastwood's new movie? Because this movie came out in only 28 movie theaters in the country. Even though this is a directed Clint Eastwood feature that could be his last movie, and they buried it. People have been very angry about this. I'm very angry about this because it's really nowhere near me. And one of the reasons why I'm angry about this is because I've been keeping up with like reviews from people that I follow that did go see the movie, and people are like, "This is a great film. It's outstanding." It's not like Cry Macho where that movie. I like that movie, but
I'm
it is
not a
a very
fan.
late. It's a late period film,
Yes.
but I've heard that Juror number two, anyone could enjoy it. The movie stands
Wow.
on its own as a great film. And I was just
Yeah.
like, man, that is extremely disappointing that I cannot see that. Anyway, one detail I'll mention about Clint Eastwood is there's like a actor who said, we're in the courtroom and we're doing this dramatic scene. And then you hear this light crunch sound. It was actually Clint who's eating Cheez Its and making the noise. Anyone else doing that on set would have been a bit iffy. But hey, it's his movie and he's a big Cheez Its guy. So that's just a quick little Clint detail about just where he's at in terms of his age and his working. But with this movie, and I think others, he doesn't say action or cut. He'll say
Right.
like, okay. He does 10-hour days with no lunch break, but he always finishes his movies on time and under budget. He's a good director. On Tuesday, the studio confirmed the genre will exit theaters on Thursday after less than a week in release before hitting paid video on demand later this month. One thing that the article does point out is that despite the fact that obviously like Clint Eastwood is a god and his movies have been very successful, he hasn't been successful lately. Like his movies haven't made a lot of money. The movie also takes a lot of jabs at Mr. David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner
No.
Brothers.
Okay.
Conventional wisdom around Hollywood posits that David Zaslav, chief executive of its parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, is ultimately responsible for withholding Juror number two's release and marketing resources in much the same way he has canceled complete movies, including Batgirl and Coyote versus Acme,
Hmm.
presumably in service of managing Warner Brothers' $40 billion in corporate debt. Money is all that matters to Zaz, says an entertainment industry consigliere who has ties to multiple studios and has worked with Eastwood. His bean counters know that Clint's movies don't bring in money anymore, and Clint is content to make them and likely shove them onto Max or PVOD. Zaslav is not an emotional person. He's a transactional fuck. I can't believe that shit, man. Obviously, it's a guy who obviously wanted to be anonymous,
Yeah.
but that sounds about right. There were like issues during the filming where people were like, okay, we're ready to film. And then we're like, we're not filming today because Eastwood health issues, quote unquote, because he's like a million years old. There was also a labor strike by the Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television Radio Artists. There were some issues with the filming, but he did. He finished it. And the movie points out that like recently, Clint Eastwood's movies just have not been making as much lately just because of things that are also kind of out of his control, like pandemic and stuff like that. And they also point out the fact that like, Christopher Nolan, he was a Warner Brothers guy. Like he made movies for
Yep.
them. And then he
They
made
fucked him
Tenet, and
over.
they were like, they fucked him over. They're like, we're not going to release this in theaters really at all. We're going to put it on a streaming right away. And he's like, huh, okay, I'm going to go to Universal. And then he came out with
He
Oppenheimer,
made
which
his
is like the
biggest
biggest movie of
film.
all time. It's like the biggest movie of all time. Like, I cannot believe that. So that's like another like good example of just Warner Brothers completely dropping the ball. They like care about money so much, and yet
They're so
like
stupid.
they it points out the fact that Eastwood hasn't done any presser interviews, so he hasn't really like said at all whether or not he feels bad about Warner Brothers basically burying his movie.
I'm sure he does.
Um, I mean, he's so old, maybe he just doesn't care.
He probably just doesn't give a shit.
One of the actors, he says, for his part, hopes that once audience do see the film, Warner Brothers' strategy will age poorly. Maybe we'll get people saying that movie was really good. How come it was just a limited release? And that creates a little bit more publicity for it. Then maybe the studios will be like, oh, sorry, please, we didn't know it was going to be received this well. That just is really quite aggravating. Clint Eastwood is alive still. He's still alive. He's a million years old, but he's still alive and he's still making stuff. And it should be more eventful that he has a new movie out. And it's just very frustrating that the people who own the movie are basically just like, we don't think that it is.
I guess I'm not surprised. I'm sad and frustrated, but I'm not surprised by it. But the last 4 or 5 Clint Eastwood films I've gone to the theater, except for Cry Macho, because I don't even know if that was released in theaters.
I don't know if it was either.
But everything else, I mean, I went and saw The Mule in theaters. I went and saw Richard Jewell in theaters.
Good movie. Good movie.
And here is a man who is so goddamn old, so old. And he is perhaps one of the most famous actors slash directors of all time. And you can't even give him the decent, like, it doesn't even cost Warner Brothers that much money. Okay, maybe they're not going to do a whole bunch of publicity behind it, fine. But just the fucking respect to just release it nationwide. How can you be such an evil human being? Who cares if this movie makes any money at all? Because this man is so old and he keeps making movies, and this will probably be his last film. Like, how can we have so little respect for the work that we do that we are unwilling to even just give him this one final thing? Just let him show his movie places. I mean, why is that so much to ask for? Surely a $40 billion company can afford to release this nationwide, which would probably do well. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't
I
do.
think it would do well. As the article points out, his movies haven't been making as much money as they have in the past. But, American Sniper, that movie was like 10 years ago. That's not one of my favorite Eastwood movies, but that was probably one of his more successful ones, right? That movie
Mhm.
was like, I feel like an event when it came out, if
Sure
you
was.
remember. And Gran Torino, I mean, that's another late period Clint Eastwood movie that has a huge reputation. I don't know if it was like successful at the time, but I think that it was. And late period Clint Eastwood is starting like in the 2000s up till now, it has its ebbs and flows, but I just think that if there's any movie to like take a chance on in theaters to see how it does, I feel like it would be a movie directed by Clint Eastwood.
And it's not like it
I just,
has no
yeah.
name actors in it. I mean, Nicholas
No,
Hoult,
it
Tony
doesn't.
Collette,
No.
J.K. Simmons.
Chris Messina. And it's a movie too that was made under budget, I believe, too. So I
Hmm.
mean, it's not like this movie that cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. Like I think it was like a pretty relatively low budget movie. It's really hard for me to understand why going through all this trouble and all this tribulation for these people to make this movie, for Clint to go out of his way, considering he's a million years old to make it, and then to not even take the chance to release it much more widely, even if you have zero respect for Clint Eastwood or whatever and what he's done and what he does. I even think from like financial point of view that it doesn't make any sense to me. I just think it would have been more successful. And considering again what people have said about it from reviews that I've seen from people who have seen it, it seems to be very good. And you know what? I want to watch this movie more than Honora. I haven't seen Honora yet, but I want to see Juror number
I don't
two
know about
more than I
that.
want to watch
I mean,
Honora. No, I do mean that. Honora, I'm sure is good and all, but I don't know. For me, the fact that I can't have Juror
I
number
mean,
two is like annoying. It's like, fuck, I want to see that movie in the theaters. Like between the two of them, I'm going Juror number two just because like Clint Eastwood's a fucking man,
I mean, I
you
love Clint
know?
Eastwood, and the fact that we can't see it is just evil and conniving, and fuck Warner Brothers and everything that they stand for.